morning, everyone. It is my pleasure to welcome you all as we begin our first plenary session of today. Our first session is titled Fragility as the New Normal, States in Permanent Emergency. For this session, I would like to invite upon on stage His Excellency the Ambassador of Republic of Kosovo to Bangladesh, Mr. Lulzim Plana, Country Economic Advisor UNDP of Bangladesh, Mr. Owais Parray, Ms. Catherine Cecil, Chief of Party Democracy International, Mr. Ali Riaz, Special Assistant to Chief Advisor Bangladesh, Mr. Clay Wescot, International Advisor, Center for Governance Studies, and the moderator of this session, Mr. Kazi Faisal bin Seraj, Country Representative, the Asia Foundation.
Shall we start?
We will use also the podium. We will use the podium.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good morning, everyone, and most welcome to this session with some wonderful, esteemed, and very experienced colleagues from across the world. And we are looking forward to a very, very enlightful and meaningful discussion for the next 80 minutes or so. To start with, I think we already had a very delightful discussion at the pre-preparation. We had this preparation from like many of you who went through this dialogues and sessions. You know there's a preparation session, and I thought like it was already so amazing, and I'm very excited that we are going to have you are up for quite a fascinating discussion ahead. And to set the stage and set the tone forward, we are going to talk about how crisis has become a new normality. Actually, I would frame it as a question whether we agree that crisis has become a new normality or not, because we come from various backgrounds, we come from various regions, our nationalities are different, the type of work that we do are different, type of places we have been to are different. So every different role most probably had different level of intensity in terms of crisis uncertainty. I remember my cognitive political period in Bangladesh was in the 90s, so we thought the whole life is going to be like the 90s in Bangladesh. Election on time, political stability and everything. But after 2000, of course, we realized that, and by that time when some of us also started their professional life, we realized that we plan during a relatively stable time. We plan based on the assumption that there's going to be stability. We strategize based on expecting a period of peace, but then we end up in crisis and regularly managing and firefighting. So that's the leadership and philosophical journey that most of us has gone through throughout our life. And this session will particularly be bringing that particular uncertainty aspect, and will again ask the question whether we should take uncertainty as the new normal or not when it comes to leadership, when it comes to politics, when it comes to democracy, when it comes to governance, and how institutional reform and institutionalizing some of this uncertainty can help or may not help reduce. So it's an open-ended session. So to start with, I think I have been requested to read out the session itself, because that itself brought quite a fascinating, healthy friction and debate among ourselves. So let me read that. Crises used to be disruptions in the political rhythm. They now embody the rhythm itself. Economic shocks, food shortages, floods, panic, and urgency are all used by governments to maintain power. None of these crises is permanent. Continuity, preserving institutions increasingly rely on improvisation to thrive. People become accustomed to living in a state of uncertainty, as though it were the new standard for stability. Everywhere power feels erratic, tense, and fleeting. Fragility ceases to be an issue and turns into the system when the exception turns into the rule. So the reason I'm saying that is also a good way to introduce our first speaker, Professor Dr. Ali Riaz, a special assistant to the chief advisor. We already heard some of your statement. It's time for you to reflect a bit more on that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Faisal bhai. I'm going to use the podium. I will try to be very brief. First of all, thanks to Center for Governance Studies for continuing this conversation despite various kinds of issues. And I'm very thankful to Azil Rahman for inviting me and CGS for giving me the opportunity to speak today. I need to start with a disclaimer. Despite the fact that my involvement with the current government, I do not represent the government. The opinion that I'm going to express today is entirely my personal opinion. The description that has been read and which is in front of you with respect to the fragility of the state and the perpetual emergency that we face, I think this description is highly skewed, because it only focuses on the domestic aspect of it, as if the crisis that we are witnessing, which I'm not disagreeing to, seems to be looked through the prism of the domestic one, as if the states are producing it. Of course, the states are at the forefront of creating this perpetual emergency, because as we see, this perpetual emergency seems to give the power to the government. And hence, not only the government, it's the state apparatuses also, which grabs those power, takes the opportunity to exercise it. So this is enormous aggrandizement of the executive power that we have witnessed, and we are continuing to witnessing it. A turning point could be considered as a COVID-19, when we saw that the governments all around the world have tried to grab as much power for surveillance and control and all sorts of things. So that is quite natural to put the state in front of all this conversation. However, I think the governments producing the instability, or the states are becoming very much repressive and all sorts of surveillance capacity to continue the crisis so that they can have the power, is only a partial story. The reason I say that it is partial story, because that the states are often itself are vulnerable for the external shocks that we see. What I mean by the external shocks, that if you look at the broader economy part of it, you'd see that the center of gravity has shifted from Atlantic to Pacific. What we have witnessed is the rise of China as well as the other East Asian countries and their expansion into Africa and Latin America and so on and so forth. However, the calculus of this global economy has not changed. So what happened is this, that this global calculus or the global economy's calculus produces a certain structure within which the countries, particularly of the global south, has to reside and operate. And that crisis is external, economic one. To give you one quick example to understand this one, in recent years, what we have witnessed in South Asia, 3 popular uprisings, right? One in Sri Lanka, which was followed by Bangladesh, and then in Nepal. In each instances, if you look very closely, what you would see, that these 3 countries have been an integral part of implementation of neoliberal economies, which has produced the growth. Even in case of Sri Lanka, we saw the growth under Rajapaksa government. But at the same time, in all instances, it has created a huge disparity. And that is what triggered this, if we call it a crisis, that has been triggered by that. So the global economic system and its calculus has produced this situation, which it is, state is a participant of it, but not necessarily in the driver's seat. Hence, this crisis that we are talking about is coming in part from this global involvement of these economies, of these states. Similarly, if we look at the other crises, climate change, for example, is it produced by the states which are the most vulnerable to it? Absolutely not. Bangladesh is at the forefront of it. Does Bangladesh create so much of it? No, it doesn't. So there are crises, if we call it as a crisis, are emanating from the global system, which makes these states vulnerable and which then being used in part the state and the government for capturing the power. With respect to the domestic element of it, where it converges is this, that this disparity which is created through this enormous economic structural elements that produces the disparity, that produces the discontent, that produces this enormous issues for the state, which state then uses. So I have given 2, and then you can pick up the entire question of how the technology is being used. Not necessarily those which has the technological advances are immune from it, but it makes the more smaller state, more weaker states vulnerable. And then these are used for surveillance. China is a case in point, what we have seen. So technology, climate change, global economic structure, all of them are creating a situation within which the states have to operate, and that crisis or those crises gives this opportunity for the state to take over and exercise more power. How do the states do it? In large measure, if you look at this, if you look at the laws and constitution, for example, the emergency provisions that we see in many countries, as a matter of fact, if you look at the constitutions, 9 out of 10 countries' constitution do have an emergency provision which gives power to the government to exercise it. Over the years, say for example, between 1985 and 2014, 137 countries have witnessed the use of emergency power, which curtailed the freedom of press, which curtailed the freedom of association, and which created a state which has enormous capacity of surveillance. So the state-sanctioned emergency power that we talk about through this legal measure, but it's not limited within the legal measures, not within the Constitution alone. Extra legal measures, extra constitutional measures are adopted by state. This is where you can pretty much align them with this, that when we are witnessing this, what is described as a perpetual emergency, that is also at a time when we are witnessing the de-democratization, the democratic backsliding. Meaning that on the one hand, the ruling elites are using these state institutions to have more power, and in doing so, there is a disjuncture between the masses and the elites. That is where the elites are compelled to use, compelled in the sense that that is what they want to do, use the state machineries and state apparatuses. So if we put these three things together, that on the one hand is this global, economic, and beyond, climate change is a case in point, IT is a case in point. That is one source of this perpetual emergency. Second source is this democratic backsliding that we are witnessing, if not before, definitely since 2006 throughout the whole world. And the third thing is this, that the states are creating this disparity which is pushing the people on the street and which is being witnessed, which is being described, which is being seen as a crisis. Hence, my point was this, that just let us not look at simply as if this perpetual emergency is created by the state for the state to exercise power. The description that has been put in front of us, it says government. I just transposed into state, that the governments are using it for their own perpetuation in power. That's one part of the story. So this entire perpetual emergency cannot be seen and cannot be simply described as a state of exception unless we look at the international aspect of it and we look at the convergence of the de-democratization or democratic backslide. So what do we do? I say the first and foremost thing that we need to do as a citizen, wherever we are, is basically vigilance. Because the price of democracy is the eternal vigilance. We need to keep that continuously focused on what the states are doing and what are the rationale and the logic that has been proposed by the state. And we cannot simply consider state as if the state is not part of this global system. So that is where I would stop, and I would suggest that let us look at it, that more power that you grab, which the perpetual emergency presupposes, that what would happen is that continuously we will see the erosion of fundamental rights, we would see the erosion of the engagement of people. That's why, despite all limitations, at this point, vigilance and struggle for democracy, and this disjuncture between the masses and the elites, that needs to be addressed. Those things needs to be addressed. I hope we can address those things at some point. Thank you again.
Thank you, Professor Yes. May I now request Ambassador Lulzim Plana? I think you are going to also talk about the regional aspect and the situational aspect, the uncertainty spillover. We are looking forward to your speech too. Thank you so much. Sir, sorry, I just realized that we actually don't have 80 minutes. I thought the session was for 80 minutes, it's actually for 60 minutes. So we need to keep it a bit brief. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yes, I do. I will take care. Dear Mr. Zilur Rahman, thank you so much for this opportunity to have this floor and then to share. And dear Professor Ali Riaz, thank you also for your insights. And it's very helpful. Ladies and gentlemen, I, as the ambassador of the Republic of Kosovo from the European soil, the southeastern part of Europe, let me share my perspectives. How do we see and the perspective and all of these in terms of fragility as a new normal today and the states in permanent emergency. My insights are more on the foreign policy and this is how Kosovo, how we are dealing nowadays with that. I will give just a short brief about the past and now how it's going. There was a time when crises were understood like temporary interruptions on the daily life and the social life. Today, this rhythm has reversed. Kosovo understands this reality very intimately. That means as a young country that we emerged from the wars and then from the conflicts with determination and hope. We have learned that fragility is not only as an internal challenge. It is nowadays produced, is amplified and exported by external actors seeking to influence the political life of their neighbors. Our experiences shows now that this fragility is rarely accidental. We see that fragility in terms of keeping continuously country under pressure, it's like engineered. The attacks that we had recently in the past years offered us a clear example. This was not a criminal incident, that was an organized attempt to destabilize the country, coordinated by individuals connected to structures outside of our country. This is that approach that tries to keep our country in a permanent state of emergency, unable to fully consolidate its institution and to secure lasting peace. Hybrid threats have become a regular feature of our environment. We also face that, and Kosovo is facing actually also coordinated disinformation, cyber incidents, manipulation of ethnic tensions, and political interference designed to weaken confidence of the central institutions. In our case, also fragility also manifests in the sensitive sector of the communities, especially minority management. Kosovo has built a legal framework that protects all communities, guarantees representation in all institutions, and promotes inclusiveness. Yet, we often encounter attempts from the region to distort these efforts, to portray our country and welcome as discriminatory, while those same critics deny basic rights to minorities within their own borders. In the Balkans, we are to move beyond. If we are not able to move beyond of this instability, we have really to acknowledge the actual and the political realities. Lasting cooperation in the region will remain incomplete until there is no full recognition of our country in that region, and the Kosovo's recognition or the independence by all neighbors. As a young state, we also faces our internal fragilities, like the economic vulnerability, somehow also the youth unemployment. But the challenge is the meeting the expectation of the people. Yet despite these pressures, we continue to reform, we continue to digitalize, to invest in human capital and strengthen rule of law institution. Looking at the international landscape, it's clear that many countries share similar struggles. Political transitions have become more unpredictable. Trust in democratic processes has weakened many places, so that having this in mind and said, states must invest in transparent governance, regional cooperation based on mutual respect and responsible global engagement. We will, as Kosovo, remain committed to these principles as we seek partnership that somehow brings to the support, the stability, but not to conflict. And the message today is very simple. Fragility becomes a system when crisis turns into routine. And to break this cycle requires political courage, regional collaboration, international solidarity. And so with all of that, Kosovo will stand ready also to work with all the partners and to share the vision of a resilient, stable, and cooperative region. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Next, I think we will hear more about how to build resilience from the ground up. And for that, we have Cecil with us. And Catherine, stage is yours.
Shuva Shakal and good morning. First, thank you so much to CGS for bringing us together to talk about these important topics. All of these sessions so far, including this one, highlight the need for democratic resilience. These trends can be paralyzing, and it's important to remember that they actually affect people at the community and individual levels. In our governance programs at Democracy International, we have learned that we too need to start at the local level, in addition to paying attention to some of the trends we just heard about from the ambassador. We need to build democratic resilience from the ground up. We have observed that robust civic and political engagement at the local level is the key to democratic resilience. We see three components that are critical to its success: youth engagement, cooperation across different political parties, and combating abuse and harassment in digital spaces. Youth account for about 17% of the population in South Asia and throughout the world, and about a quarter of the population in Bangladesh. Demonstrating the new geometry of power, youth-led protests in Bangladesh and Nepal toppled governments. Youth also have great potential to rebuild communities. They're eager to make a difference and looking for different roles to play. Engaging youth improves representation of this large population and strengthens the leadership skills of the next generation. Young people have delivered impressive results throughout Bangladesh, including improvements in infrastructure, water and sanitation, waste management, and healthcare facilities. In terms of cross-party cooperation, even though we see intra-party violence, political parties are well positioned to contribute to peaceful political engagement and strengthened community bonds. Following the July uprising in Bangladesh in 2024, there were enormous levels of engagement throughout the country, but people were fragmented and security was weak. We used social and behavioral science tools to study our efforts to bring people together. With funds from the UK Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office and support from the Asia Foundation, we conducted a behavioral factor assessment to study individual, social, and structural influences that help or hinder cooperation among political parties. Especially at the local level, party members called for more cross-party dialogue, discussion, consensus building, and social engagement. They repeatedly mentioned our multi-party advocacy forums, which bring diverse party members together to push for community improvements. They said they were motivated to cooperate because they believe that the family is the most important social group and that opposition party members were their brothers and sisters. This is consistent with the most recent World Values Survey. They also cited concern for the national interest and the interest of the common people, their belief in the power of inclusion, collaborative discussion, and consensus, and the importance of cooperation in upholding democracy. Finally, they cited the values of care and prevention of harm, which again is consistent with global findings on core values common to every culture. One multi-party forum in Barguna was particularly effective. In August 2024, violence against Bangladesh's Hindu community surged. More than 1,000 houses, businesses, and temples were attacked across 49 districts. Idols were vandalized at a temple in Barguna's Fuljuri Galachipa area, raising fears before the Durga Puja festival. The multi-party group held a roundtable with police, city officials, and temple committees to call for stronger protection, and local authorities responded immediately. Police deployed extra forces, and the city created a 24-hour rapid response unit. With continuous follow-up by the multi-party group, no attacks were reported in Barguna during the entire Durga Puja festival. The district moved from fear to peace. The key elements for the success of all of these multi-party groups, we've worked with 22 throughout Bangladesh, were the frequency of engagement among the parties and their ability to create positive working relationships with local authorities by stressing their commitment to broader community benefits and shared values. In terms of combating harassment and abuse online, this has already come up here and it will come up in the next panel as well. We are concerned with abuse and harassment targeting women in politics. A recent study showed that 76% of female MPs in the Asia-Pacific region reported online psychological gender violence. Similarly, even though they played leadership roles in the 2024 uprising, women activists in Bangladesh face coordinated smear campaigns. One young candidate in Dhaka reported receiving hundreds of abusive messages within hours of announcing that she would run for office, forcing her to temporarily suspend her online campaign. These incidents not only damage individual reputations, but also discourage women from engaging in public life. Women said that cyberbullying was the main reason they did not run for office in the recent student union elections throughout Bangladesh. Research shows that when women hold positions of power, governments better serve all citizens' needs. So this disturbing trend undermines representation and the quality of democracy. Unfortunately, there's no agreement on one effective solution, but it's clear that we need a multi-pronged approach, including legal measures and media interventions, such as fact-checking and increased accountability, as well as psychosocial support and challenges to harmful gender norms. Together, these interventions can protect women's voices in digital spaces and reinforce democratic resilience. Once again, we see local engagement as a key pathway to building democratic resilience, leveraging the benefits of youth engagement, cross-party cooperation, and efforts to improve the security of online space. Onak Dhanabad, thank you very much.
Excellent.
Now we are going to have a bit more of a multilateral view on the topic. So Mr. Owais Parray, please. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum, namaskar, shalom, igunlar, dobre utra, selamat pagi. Has fragility increased, and is it the new normal? This is what we were asked to consider in our deliberations today. My view is that in some areas it has increased, in some areas it has not. And maybe I should have given a disclaimer. I'm an economist, so we tend to always we phrase things typically like that. We say on one hand, this is happening, on the other hand, there's something else is happening. So we never come up with very clear messages. I'm looking at fragility in 3 dimensions. One is economic, of course. This is the area I know more about. If you look at economic fragility, I think it has lessened, but there are some areas in our economies where fragility has increased. If you look globally, GDP has increased since 1960, it has increased 5-fold. Asia, its contribution or its share of in global GDP has tripled. The share is approximately 36%, and it's the fastest growing region in the world, and it's likely that by 2030, Asia will contribute almost half of the global GDP. We have also seen lots of improvements. Extreme poverty has been reduced. It was 36% in 1990. Now it's less than 10%. And we have also seen that recessions that affected economies, crisis, the frequency of crisis has decreased, although it may not seem like that. But if you look, historically, in the last 20, 30 years, the crisis that we have experienced, economic crisis we have experienced, were not as severe. And most importantly, the response and the rebound has been much quicker. And the good thing is we have the tools, we have the knowledge to address crises. We saw more recently after the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic. The response was swift, and many of the economies rebounded very quickly. In addition to that, we have also seen how governments have responded to broadening the social safety net, disaster response. Not all countries are doing it very well, but we see it broadly. Many countries have social protection programs in place, and they can respond to crises. But our economic fragility comes from a rise in income and wealth inequality. And I'll come to that in my concluding remarks. And let me at least underline it here. Solutions like redistribution are not necessarily going to help with that. It's important, but that won't address the rising inequality of income and wealth. Our the second dimension where I'm looking at fragility is planetary fragility. That undeniably has increased. I think the data is there, the science shows it. We are now at the edge of a cliff. We have already hit, according to the latest reports, we have already hit 1.4 degrees centigrade temperature. And I was also recently reading, we may have hit one of the tipping points, which is the mass die-off of coral reefs. Number third is technological fragility. Now, I'm not going to talk about cybersecurity, misinformation, disinformation. I think that indeed has increased. We feel more insecure, although technology has given us lots of benefits, and we can continue to benefit from prudent use of technological advancements, which have undoubtedly increased quite a bit. I think the challenge that we, as a humankind, we haven't faced in the past, and we hear a lot about AI, is it will be a challenge for humans because we were always on top of a pyramid, intellectual pyramid, but that increasingly is being questioned by synthetic intelligence, that I'm not so sure how we will live with that technology, which in some areas might be even far more intelligent than we are. And that relationship between humans and AI, this is going to be a critical area, and that, I believe, increases our fragility. Now, of course, that's related to state. I won't get into the politics. There was a lot of promise in the 1990s that we are seeing the end of history. Our political development seemed to be converging in that direction. We haven't seen that. There have been regressions. But indeed, the governments are being asked to do more. It's not a question of just putting in place regulations, providing defense, security. But increasingly, governments are being asked to become more entrepreneurial. And that's related to my final point, which is about state capability. Now, state capability is a very broad term, but that needs to be enhanced so that governments can respond to all these challenges that they face. And let me add here that governments are also being increasingly scrutinized because of, again, the technology. Information is available here. One of the downsides, I mean, we all are happy that information is flowing, but one of the challenges is that it can lead to short-termism. Governments being scrutinized even more might opt for solutions that provide temporary fixes, that might cater to certain political interests. So that's the challenge. The challenge that we face, I talked about climate, I talked about inequality, require long-term solutions. And one of the solutions, of course, is to look at a new generation of structural transformation. A structural transformation that makes our economies greener. There is indeed going to be a lot of disruption. Technology can no doubt help, and that's the challenge for the governments, and that's where they will be tested. Their entrepreneurial spirit will be tested. And some of the tested strategies that have worked, and I believe will continue to work, is to invest in human development. Human development not as human capital, so that you invest in humans so that they contribute more to the growth. No. You invest more in humans so that they have more choices, their agency is enhanced. And lastly, this is not the time to retreat from multilateralism. Yes, we have seen disruptions, particularly in the form of tariff and trade, but the good news is, even now, 75% of the trade actually is being carried under WTO rules. Yes, there have been some measures in terms of non-tariff measures have increased, but I think many countries still are following global rules and regulations in terms of how they interact with each other. Let me just stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Mr. Wescot? Mr. Wescot? The floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much. Is this microphone working? Yes, thank you very much to CGS for asking me here to speak today. We live in an age where crisis is no longer the exception that proves the rule. Crisis is the rule. And I want to spend the next few minutes exploring what this means to how states govern, how power operates, and how we as citizens, scholars, and observers make sense of political life in the 21st century. Now, political theory used to operate on a clear distinction, normal times versus states of emergency. The German philosopher Carl Schmitt famously argued that sovereignty is defined by who decides on the exception. Constitutions were designed for stability, and emergency provisions were meant to be temporary. But something has shifted. Economic shocks don't resolve, they cascade. Climate events don't end, they compound. Pandemics, inflation crises, migration disruptions, they're overlapping, mutually reinforcing, permanent features of governance. And nowhere is this more visible than in Bangladesh, where we are today. Consider what happened here in 2024 alone. In May of 2024, Cyclone Ramal made landfall. Then there were flash floods, riverine floods. Then in August, the worst flooding in eastern Bangladesh in 34 years, affecting about 10% of Bangladesh's population. The government's emergency response infrastructure could never stand down between crises. Disaster relief became not exceptional, but routine. This is what governance looks like when flooding isn't a disruption, but a recurring reality. And then there was a political crisis. Student-led protests leading to the Prime Minister leaving the country. All this while the government was trying to control the flood response and navigating regime change. Civil servants were wondering who they should report to. Police forces are being restructured while managing disaster response. The state apparatus was improvising. Now you put economic crisis on top of that, and there's definitely an international dimension as well. Inflation rose. Bangladesh taka lost value against the dollar. Non-performing loans hit record levels. For a country that imports much of its food and fuel, currency collapse directly translates into cost of living. So here's the key insight. These crises don't resolve sequentially, they compound. Climate crisis plus political crisis plus economic crisis don't add up, they multiply. And the result is a state that remains active, even hyperactive, but loses strategic capacity, always responding, yet finding it difficult to plan, always fighting the last crisis, finding it difficult to prevent the next one. What we see in Bangladesh is happening globally. Governments haven't collapsed under this pressure. Instead, they've adapted. Improvisation has become institutionalized. What were once ad hoc crises become permanent modes of operation. Executive powers expand. Legislative processes are bypassed for urgent merit measures that never sunset. And this is happening in the developing world as well. In my own country, President Trump justifies his tariff increases and the detention of immigrants as emergency powers. Second, crisis becomes a governance tool. Perpetual emergency isn't just something states endure, it's something they can use. Urgency justifies centralization. Fear enables control. When everything is urgent, scrutiny becomes a luxury we can't afford. Democratic deliberation feels too slow. Citizens adapt their expectations. People develop crisis competence. the ability to navigate constant uncertainty. We learn to live not just financially paycheck to paycheck, but existentially. We stop planning long term because the ground keeps shifting. In countries like Bangladesh, farmers plant crops knowing they may be destroyed. Families build homes they expect to rebuild. This isn't resilience. This is normalized precarity. The result is a distinctive form of political power, fragile and reactive, but also strangely durable. It's fragile because legitimacy depends on crisis management rather than long-term vision. Leaders are judged by their response to the latest shock, not their ability to prevent future ones. Governments must demonstrate they're addressing floods, food prices, law enforcement simultaneously. It's also durable because it's hard to challenge a government that's always firefighting. Opposition politics struggle when the answer to what would you do differently is complicated by genuine emergencies. Revolutionary change seems impossibly risky when stability is so precarious. So where does this leave us? I don't think we can return to the old normal, the world of stable growth, predictable politics, clear distinctions between crisis and calm. That world, if it ever existed, is gone. But I also think we should accept fragility as inevitable. The fact that governments use crisis to maintain power doesn't mean we can't demand better crisis response, more democratic accountability, more equitable distribution of emergency burdens. The new normal requires new politics, politics that can build resistance without sacrificing rights, that can act urgently without abandoning deliberation, that can acknowledge fragility without surrendering to it. Because when fragility becomes a system, the question isn't whether we live in crisis. The question is who decides how we live through it, who pays the price, and whether we maintain our capacity to imagine something better. Thank you very much.
We will open it up for the audience in a little bit. If I could see how many hands are up so that I can understand how much time we have and we can adjust. Oh, quite a lot of enthusiasm. Just before opening it up, any last one or two key messages from each of the panelists? Dr. Riaz?
The key point that I would like to drive home then is that considering the state's fragility from one-dimensional aspect is going to lead us to a blind alley. That's why it requires a comprehensive understanding that the states, are states fragile? Yes, they are becoming fragile, but are the states getting stronger and more resilient to some extent? Yes, they are. So that is what I want to draw home, is that let us not consider it in a very one-dimensional aspect and see it from only domestic elements of it. Rather, it's better to see it as a comprehensive, as a composite entity. State is no longer just a domestic institution. It is a part of this global economic and political dimension. And again, if you're talking about the state's fragility, we are witnessing the fragility of the international organizations as well. UN is a case in point. So there are these various dimensions needs to be seen as a composite one. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else wants to add? Cool. So we are going to go to the audience now. Please, you are close to the mic. I think there are mics are positioned in places, right? Organizers, I think.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, please.
Thank you very much. It's a very pleasure to ask a question. Can I ask a question, Mr. Ali Riaz? who is my elder brother of Dhaka University in 1970, and I am in 1990. I think a country may be destroyed for various purposes. So only 3 points. Latest IMF and World Bank in Washington, D.C., his CEO always say job creation. Job creation, job creation. So I think is Bangladesh capable to afford this job creation, young generation? Because Bangladesh private sector is very slow now and it's not increasing. 61% service holder in Bangladesh. Number 2, like Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Maldives, various third world country, corruption is a big problem. The ruling parties and rich people, their sons and daughters, their lifestyle, their fashionable, it hits the poor people, middle class people. Third, corruption, Bangladesh is now a main problem. So I asked the question to Mr. Alirias, this problem, so will this uprising, revolution, reback again and again Bangladesh? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let us take a few more questions and then, please. You need to come close to the mic, I guess.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Yes. Good afternoon. Thank you very much. I'm Zuraida from Malaysia. I'm an advocate of women empowerment. Okay. So the thing I see here is very important because in Bangladesh itself, 60% of the undergrads are women. Yeah. And by the Grameen Bank model, the advisor, has great faith in women because they are very good pay master, 100%, almost 100%, they pay back their loans. So given that kind of assets that Bangladesh has, so we should capitalize on the women contribution to the economy because it is proven that the Harvard studies and so on, that women contribute about 30% increase in productivity of any organization. So given that, the only way that we can increase the women participation in Bangladesh particularly is to look into the election system where we have to have a policy there should be at least 30% of women participation so they can open doors. Otherwise, political parties are very masculine. They're very masculine and it's not easy for the women to come out in the political structure. I was there and I know. And then this is what we have to go through. So I hope if the change with the election system, more women, young women especially in Bangladesh, can take part in politics and they can contribute to the nation. If the men contribute 100%, the women contribute another 100%, you will have 200% progress and development for the country. Thank you.
Thanks, ma'am. Please, gentlemen.
Hello, I'm Ipan. I'm a student. I have 2 questions. The first one is to Alirias, sir. When a government operates in a constant state of emergency, how do we distinguish between the genuine crisis management and the deliberate use of permanent urgency? Is it possible that it's a political strategy to avoid the accountability? The question is to Alirias, sir. And the rest is to all the panelists, whoever would like to answer. That is, when fragility becomes a default condition of a state, how do people retrust again the institutions? Does it require a structural change or a cultural change? Thank you.
Excellent questions. Thank you. Gentlemen over there.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Navid from Department of Economics, University of Dhaka. So I am more interested in economic sector. So I have 2 questions. One is for Mr. Alirias, sir, and other one is open for all the panelists. So the first question is to Mr. Alirias, sir, as you were a member of Constitution Reform Committee. So do you believe Bangladesh has the institutional tools to stop emergency style government to be normalized again? And if you do not believe, then what checks and balances are most urgent, and have you proposed them in the constitutional reforms? And the other question is to all the panelists, that is, given the interdependencies among Bay of Bengal economies, what do you think, how can Bangladesh collaborate on macroeconomic policy collaboration such as balance of payment, trade, to reduce the systematic shocks arising from fragility? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please, ma'am.
Thank you. My name is Mohsina Mustafa Miti, and I'm currently working as a research associate at the Bangladesh Institute of Peace and Security Studies, BIPS. And my question is for Ali Riyaz, sir. So, sir, during this whole ruling period of the interim government, we have seen that our police and our intelligence agencies couldn't play a much significant role in terms of maintaining order. Even Bangladesh Army had to step in at times. So, my question is, sir, how would you like to assess the preparedness of the security forces of our country currently to tackle the potential unrest during the time of election? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. And I guess that's the last question.
Hello. It's okay, it's okay.
This gentleman first.
My name is Minhajul Islam and I'm an independent researcher. My question to Professor Riyaz, as a political theorist, in my observation, since the Arab Spring to present, the series of massive uprisings that took place across the Middle Eastern and South Asian countries. In my view, all these uprisings has three common characteristics other than else. That is the democratic aspiration, anti-corruption rage, and distrusting the formal political system. The series of these movements is still continuing. In this circumstance, my question is, how do we proceed and manage the stability within the existing political system that has already been questioned and rejected to some extent? Or do we feel the necessity to redefine, reset, and recoin the very idea of politics, political parties, and political dynamics? And I have another question to Mr. Scott. The hyperactivity of state in the name of security and mitigating the crisis, how do we bring in the democratic stability in the conventional governance system? How do we manage the clarity of legitimacy while the very essence and source of legitimacy itself have shifted? Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you. Last question, please.
Thank you so much. I'm Rizvin Owais. I'm a TV journalist working in Channel I. My question to Professor Ali Riyaz. We are talking about the new normalcy of state fragility. What is the status of Bangladesh right now? Fragility to fragmentation or rebuilding and resurrection? Main political parties, including BNP, is blaming EU for this fragmentation. Mistrust among the parties regarding reform and election. Even one of the champion of reform agenda, Mr. Devopriyo Bhattacharya, yesterday, standing on the same dais, he told that reform agenda now is like mission impossible. Why you are under so much blame? Even there is criticism of wasting public money in consensus commission. Thank you, sir. If possible, please answer in Bangla for better understanding for the audience. Thank you, sir.
We are on the clock, but given your, yeah, please, go ahead.
Thank you so much, the moderator, for giving me the floor. This is Dr. Razia from BISS. It's a government think tank under Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I mean, having heard since morning and seen you that it was a brilliant discussion among the panelists. Yes, it's true, having seen the theme of the topic, we are very much fragile, not in terms of within the country itself and beyond that. Fragile also is a very much, I think, predicament for taking a concerted effort. So it feels to me that we are, live in a country with realism where might is right, and the small countries are facing, a lot of barriers in terms of every aspects. Yesterday, I heard one of the statement from Nepalese ambassador who said that it is not important that, what is said, it is more than important who is saying. So apart from this, my specific question, to the one of the panelists, Stephen, that you mentioned that state credibility, state power, these sort of things are very important. You know that for the last more than 1 year, we have gone through an unprecedented situation and we are expecting a lot. But if you, if we want to increase the state capacity or state credibility, to what extent we need to go far in terms of education, media literacy, technological advancement, because since we in the morning we have heard that it is we live in the technological age. Proper utilization of the digital technology or public diplomacy is very important. So from Bangladesh context, I'd like to know from you that how we can increase our state credibility or state capacity in these changing circumstances to compete with the other states. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Please, you don't need to go through all the specific questions. If it can be done in general answer. Dr. Ali Riaz, I think you you had most of the questions. Please go ahead. And some of the questions are also answers, by the way. So please.
Can you hear me? Okay, thank you. I would start with that question who requested to speak me in Bangla. Usually, I don't respond to personal questions because this is not the platform to speak on my personal issues. However, since you have asked, I'm going to respond, and I would respond in Bangla. প্রথম কথা হচ্ছে আর্থিক দুর্নীতির প্রশ্নটা আপনি তুলেছেন তথ্যগতভাবে ভুল। জাতীয় ঐকমত্য কমিশনের বিরুদ্ধে কোনো আর্থিক দুর্নীতির অভিযোগ নেই। কোনো বিশেষ ব্যক্তি বা প্রতিষ্ঠান যদি কোনো মিথ্যাচার করে থাকে তার দায়িত্ব তাকেই নিতে হবে। জাতীয় ঐকমত্য কমিশনের পক্ষ থেকে সুস্পষ্টভাবে টাকার হিসাব দেওয়া হয়েছে। সরকারের বরাদ্দকৃত 7 কোটি টাকার মধ্যে 2 কোটি টাকারও কম খরচ করা হয়েছে এবং কিভাবে খরচ করা হয়েছে সেটা চিফ অ্যাডভাইজার্সের অফিস থেকে এবং কমিশনের পক্ষ থেকে বলা হয়েছে। ফলে আপনি যে মিথ্যাচারটা রিপিট করেছেন সেটার জন্য আপনাকে আমি আরেকবার শুধু স্মরণ করিয়ে দেব যে কোনো তথ্যের সর্বশেষ ভাষ্যটি লক্ষ্য করা খুব জরুরি। কেননা যে ব্যক্তি বা প্রতিষ্ঠান বা সংগঠন যারা এই প্রশ্ন তুলেছিলেন তারা কিন্তু এই হিসাবের পরে আর কোনো কথা বলেননি। দ্বিতীয় যে প্রশ্নটা খানিকটা ব্যক্তিগত, তবু আমি ওই একই প্রশ্নকর্তার সেটা হচ্ছে যে আমার বিরুদ্ধে অভিযোগ কেন দেশটার খানিকটা হলেও কথাবার্তা বলার চর্চার একটা সুযোগ তৈরি হয়েছে। যে কোনো রকম কাজ করলে তাতে সমালোচিত হওয়াটাই স্বাভাবিক। 30টির বেশি রাজনৈতিক দলের মধ্যে আলাপ আলোচনার মধ্য দিয়ে জাতীয় ঐকমত্য কমিশন একটি জাতীয় সনদ তৈরি করতে পেরেছে এবং সেগুলো বাস্তবায়নের জন্য সরকারের পক্ষ থেকে পদক্ষেপ গ্রহণ করা হয়েছে। আমরা আশা করছি, আমি ব্যক্তিগতভাবে আশা করি যে জনগণের সমর্থনে ভবিষ্যতে বাংলাদেশে বিভিন্নভাবে কাঠামোগত এবং সাংবিধানিক সংস্কার সম্ভব হবে। ফলে যদি কেউ মনে করেন যে সংস্কারের প্রশ্নটি ইতিমধ্যেই মারা গেছে এবং তারা অবিচিয়রি লিখতে চান, তারা লিখতে পারেন, কারণ অবিচিয়রি লেখার অভ্যাস তাদের আছে এবং অন্যরা অবিচিয়রি লিখতে পারেন। কিন্তু আমি মনে করি যে বাংলাদেশের একটা ঐতিহাসিক সুযোগ তৈরি হয়েছে এবং সেটা অব্যাহত থাকবে। আমি জাতীয় ঐকমত্য কমিশনের পক্ষ থেকে যখন জুলাই জাতীয় সনদ স্বাক্ষরিত হয় সেই অনুষ্ঠানে সুস্পষ্টভাবে বলেছিলাম যে একটি দলিল দিয়ে আসলে সমস্ত রকম সংস্কার সম্ভব নয়, এটি সূচনা মাত্র। এবং জাতীয় সনদের যে শিরোনাম করা হয়েছে সেটা হচ্ছে ভবিষ্যতের পথরেখা। আশা করি সেটা আপনাদের সকলেরই নজরে থাকবে। ফ্র্যাজিলিটির থেকে ফ্র্যাগমেন্টেশনে যাবে কিনা এখন আমি একটু ইংরেজিতে সুইচ করি, যেহেতু অন্যরা প্রশ্নটা তুলেছেন, উনিও তুলেছেন। Whether a state and state of politics would move from fragility to fragmentation depends on several factors. First of all are the role of the actors themselves. Because I believe in the agency that nothing in history is destiny. History is made by the people and the actors. Hence, whether the state, as we experience now with respect to Bangladesh, will move forward and have further consolidation or fragmentation depends on the actors. But actors alone would not determine. It depends on a combination of other circumstances. And in this regard, I am more inclined to suggest that actors have a better role. And as an individual, as a citizen of Bangladesh, you have the power to actually steer that. And I hope that would be steers towards more consolidation. But states' consolidation does not necessarily mean that a strong state which would be more repressive. That is what we are witnessing over the last 2 decades, or perhaps more than that. In many cases, the states are becoming apparently, fragile, but they are getting more and more power, which I described as an executive aggrandizement, having the executive power, and the disjuncture between the people and the ruling elites. So hope that is something that we can determine and moving forward. Someone referred to this, the popular uprising since the Arab Spring, and hence the expectation, whether we should redefine the politics. I cannot agree with you more. It is time to redefine the politics. And it is not only the popular uprising that we have seen. It is also, if you look at the transition, if you look at the transformation of the politics globally, that you would see that politics as we used to think is now changing. However, there are status quoists, they will fight back, and institutions would fight back, and that is what is happening. What we are witnessing is this clash between these two understandings of politics. Politics in the sense that traditionally we thought, but it is changing, and in the coming years, if not months, definitely in the decades we would see that one. In maintaining order, whether security apparatuses in Bangladesh are ready, this is a question that requires further elaboration, but I would just simply say that maintaining order itself needs to be defined. Maintaining order might be necessary, but that does not necessarily mean that we should be depending on the security apparatuses for maintaining the order. Until and unless there is a popular participation, it would be impossible for any forces, police, military, or anything that would be able to maintain order. Particularly in circumstances that we are going through, that is the transitional phase. Police has been, in the last 16 years, what we have seen has been so politicized, and now it is so weak. And in some cases, they are also continuing the practices that they had. Those things need to be changed. But it is, let us not depend on the security apparatuses. There is a danger to it, and I hope would be aware of it. Final point with respect to the institutional mechanism of perpetual emergency. There has been some progress on this. Constitution Reform Commission made some recommendation, and all political parties, irrespective of their ideological orientation, have made some changes in the proposed changes in the Constitution regarding the emergency provision. Previously, the way it has been used for political purposes, we expect that with the changes, it would be possible to make at least limit this. This is not going to go away, unfortunately. Also, with respect to the declaration of emergency in Bangladesh, what we saw, it became completely on the ruling party. What has been agreed upon is that the opposition leader would be involved in the conversation in making the decision regarding the emergency. We hope that would put some roadblocks into the abuse of the power. I wish this emergency provision had not been included, but as I mentioned, throughout the whole world, almost 9 out of 10 constitutions have emergency provisions in some form, and there has been abuse, and we hope that abuse would be restrained, some constraint would be established on if these changes are adopted in the Constitution. Thank you, and sorry for taking more time, I understand.
Oh, no worries. I think we of course ran out of time, and if you still need to have answers to your question, you can always reach out to the panelists after the session. But we really need to stop right now because there's another exciting panel coming up next. So thank you so much for everyone for your contribution, and thank you the audience for your patience. And it has been very, very meaningful 1 hour at least. Thank you so much. Thank you.